John Steenhuisen has broken his silence on his recent credit card debt scandal. Let's react to his groundbreaking new testimony. So recently, John Steenhuisen was embroiled in a media scandal surrounding his reported credit card debt. So for those of you who might not be aware, Steenhuisen, the leader of the DA, was reportedly issued a default judgment by the Cape Town Magistrates Court in May for unpaid personal credit card debt of nearly 150,000 rand. This issue only seems to have been brought to light recently. And now it has also been alleged that the DA's Federal Finance Committee decided to remove his party credit card earlier this year because the account couldn't be reconciled. And so all of these reports allege that Steenhuisen has had some difficulty managing his finances. But with all of these rumors swirling around in the media, John Steenhuisen himself actually decided to open up about the situation, speaking on Biz News for the first time publicly about what has happened. But before we get into his testimony, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel? It's completely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button in the bottom left corner of this video. Now let's get into it. Alright, so the video itself was on Biz News TV. I'm not going to go through the entire interview because it is very long, but for those of you who are interested in checking it out, go to the Biz News TV YouTube channel and you are sure to find the video. It has gone pretty viral. Now, without further ado, let's begin.
Let's start at the beginning. You're from Durban. RW has spent a lot of time in Durban as well. In his column, he says they talk a lot about chances in Durban. He calls you a chancer. He says essentially you've got no academic qualifications beyond matric. You've talked your way into your positions, and the impression is created that you haven't really got to where you are by merit. And I'm sure that would rankle.
Yeah, well, I would start off, first of all, saying that I found the ad hominem nature of the attack quite something. Obviously, R.W. Johnson's greatly inspired by Donald Trump, where you can't win the argument, you resort to personal denigration.
Okay, already he's pulling the Trump card. You know, I just don't understand why John Steenhuisen always has to make himself such a liberal all the time, always against conservatism. It's just the most bizarre thing to me because so much of the DA's voter base is made up of conservative people. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a conservative yourself, but at least have a little bit of respect and not always slander conservatives. You just don't hear them complaining about the far left and those sorts of extremists in the same way, which is just hypocritical. But anyway, John is not helping his popularity at all with these kinds of statements.
But the reality is that the only chancer here is R.W. Johnson, because if one looks at the allegations that he's made, a number of them are blatantly false. A number of them are misrepresentations. Let me say this, Alec. I may not have a degree, but I've worked jolly hard my entire career. As a young councillor in Durban, I fought the corner for the residents of my ward. As a legislator in the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, I put KZN's interests first, and I worked hard. And in the National Assembly, I've worked very hard over the last decade and a half to be able to put the people of South Africa first, and I continue to do so every single day. And I think it's rather insulting of R.W. Johnson to assume because somebody doesn't have an academic qualification that they're somehow unworthy to serve in Parliament or to be a public representative. In doing so, he would essentially rule out around 80% of South Africans from ever serving in public office. Now, that's elitism of the worst order.
So I have to disagree with John here. I don't see how that's elitism. I think that's just looking for proper standards of what politicians should meet in order to serve the country. There is no way where 80% of the country should be eligible to enter Parliament or become a career politician. Okay, now I'm not saying that you need to have some extremely strict qualification barriers, But what you should at least be doing is ensuring that people understand and have the knowledge of politics and the way that the system works before getting into office. And you see this with many jobs. You cannot become an accountant unless you become a qualified CA and a registered auditor, or if you're not an auditor, you still have to have completed your articles, completed your bar exam. Same with attorneys, same with advocates, teachers, medical doctors, dentists, and I can go on. I do not see why politicians should be any different. Yes, it is nice to sometimes have business people and other professions who come into politics because they offer different perspectives. But I still think there should at least be some kind of a qualification barrier here. In my view, what the IEC should be doing is that before anybody gets sworn in as a member of parliament, there should be a qualification test. People should be tested on the laws of the country, the system of law, legal procedure, the constitution. They should also honestly be tested on other things such as the economy. I mean, look at how you still have the likes of the EFF and MK busy punting communism. I mean, it's a failed ideology that collapsed in the 90s with the destruction of the USSR. Let's not go and pretend that this is anything new. Most countries, at least developed countries, don't even have communist parties anymore. So this is really just pathetic in my view. But yeah, I just have to combat what John Steenhuisen says there. I think it's completely inappropriate that there are no barriers to entry because after all, politicians are quite literally the lawmakers of the country. They should have certain qualification before they receive the power that they already have. But let's continue.
And I think that the real chancellor here is R.W. Johnson, who never misses a chance to have something negative to say about me. But it's been the same with every leader of the Democratic Alliance. He was unhappy when Helen Zille was elected. He was unhappy when Musi Maimane was elected. And he stayed true to form and been unhappy about my election. And that's all right. It's on him. And clearly I'm occupying a lot of space rent-free in that head of his.
Is this perceived from your perspective as, because he really is, I guess, inside the tent. He's a liberal. He's not an ANC supporter. Is it perceived as maybe an elder statesman having a critique that you need to take seriously and look at, or do you just dismiss what he says? Yeah.
He's not somebody I take seriously. And that's why his columns just wash over my back, just like the books that he's written predicting South Africa's demise that has never come. And so I think that these things are it's just the slings and arrows of politics. You get people who will never be unhappy. R.W. Johnson is clearly one of those people who's never happy unless he's unhappy. And that's fine. He's entitled to his view and he's entitled to his opinions. But what he's not entitled to do is to tell blatant lies about me. The first lie is that I've never had a job outside politics. That is simply not true. I spent 10 years in the private sector from 2005 to, it's from 1995 to 2006, where I worked for a large property management firm in Durban and for a large wholesaler with an international footprint. I only took up full-time politics when I was elected to the Durban Executive Committee in around about 2006. And since then, I've worked very hard representing people. I've done my best. I've served with diligence. I've never stolen money. I've never abused my position. I've always acted in the very best interests of the people of South Africa. And I will continue to do so despite the best efforts of people like R.W. Johnson to denigrate the contribution that I've made.
That's an interesting point, John. I don't recall you actually discussing or sharing that information publicly, that you have actually worked outside of politics for quite an extended period. But I suppose as a city councillor, it's not, or was it not a full-time position then?
No.
Okay, so there is quite a little bit of waffle over here in this interview. So I'm just going to fast forward to the other important part, which is really his address of the personal finance situation.
Those for us?
Well, let me just say this, Alex. I mean, this was a matter that was sorted out a long time ago. Like most South Africans with 3 children, 2 at school and 1 at university. And with the cost of living, I also feel the pressure. And I don't supplement my income with Woolworths bags full of cash from interested and corrupt individuals. I'm not out there using my position as the Minister of Agriculture to enrich myself. And so, yes, I did get into some personal financial difficulties, but these were resolved. And these are not unlike what happens to 80% of South Africans across the country on a daily basis. But I'm very proud of the fact that I sorted my own issues out. I didn't go to Kat Matlala and ask him for a bag full of cash. I haven't had to rely on hangers-on and corrupt individuals to supplement my income. I've done it myself. Gone on and done it, and I will continue to do so. And I think it's jolly unfair that a single person is singled out when many, many South Africans across the spectrum, many of your viewers, are facing similar financial pressures in an environment where the economy hasn't grown and where the cost of living has exceeded many people's expectations, and life is expensive. School fees are expensive, university fees are expensive, and we're all trying to give our families the very best that we can give them in our circumstances. And I'm sorry again if that's not something that Bill Johnson appreciates or likes. Maybe he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Maybe he was given a trust fund by his parents. I wasn't. I've had to do everything myself. I've inherited nothing, and I've gone on, and everything I've achieved, I've done myself through sheer hard work and dedication to what the causes that I've given my life.
Okay, so that's pretty much what we needed to check from this interview for the purposes of this video. Again, if you want to check out the rest of the interview, please be sure to head over to BizNews TV. But I have to actually issue quite a staunch response against what Steenhuisen has said. He makes as if his financial difficulties are the same as 80% of South Africans, as he calls it. But this is categorically false, and I'm going to prove that right here. So, if we take a look at his record, John Steenhuisen has been a member of the National Assembly in Parliament since 2011. And so this will be his 15th year coming up in Parliament. And what we also need to acknowledge is, yes, it's very nice that he was able to sort his personal debt out and that he hasn't been a corrupt individual, as he claims, much like other members of Parliament. But it's still not good enough, and I'm going to explain why. So when you look at his situation in Parliament compared to the ordinary South African, or the 80% as he calls it, he has a very different financial situation, and he really does not have the excuse to get into this amount of debt like many other South Africans do. I understand that he has a wife and 3 children, but there is still no excuse, because if we actually look at the amount of perks that he receives as a government minister and even just as an MP, it is absolutely jaw-dropping. So over here, I've got a presentation provided by the Parliament of South Africa itself, explaining exactly the massive perks that John Steenhuisen as well as other MPs receive. And this was released just after last year's election, and so it's for the current administration. So, if we go into this member support services booklet, we see how there are many benefits that these MPs receive. They include air travel, travel reimbursement, tools of trade including mobile phone, laptop, and tablet, relocation support. So, of course, many of them are not previously located in Cape Town, and so in order for them to be near Parliament, the Parliament will actually support them as they look to relocate for their term. Funeral-related support, personal accident insurance, travel insurance, bursaries. Now, I wasn't able to find more information on bursaries, but of course, this could be about school or university. And hey, Steenhuisen has children in both, so surely he'd be able to get them covered, at least partially, by bursaries. There's then disability support and airport parking. So not only are you getting to enjoy some air travel, but you're also able to park your car very comfortably. You don't have to take an Uber, and your airport parking gets covered. But here, let's go into a little bit more details of what actually is involved here. So here we go. Traveling. Members may travel by air, train, bus, or motor vehicle. Whips, presiding officers, and house chairs get 96 single journeys annually, whereas all other members get 88 single journeys. And as we know, Steenhuisen has been the chief whip of the DA, as well as a minister, as well as a regular MP. The spouse of a may use a maximum of 20 entitlements per annum of the member's allocation. And so he can travel with his wife if he wants to. Let's continue. So if we take a look here, we see that economy class travel is covered for members, except if they have more than 10 years of service. Now, of course, John Steenhuisen will not receive this benefit because he has been in Parliament for more than 10 years. Still, there are plenty of other great perks that he will receive. So as we can see, members are reimbursed at the SARS published rate per kilometer for traveling by motor vehicle. Now, of course, Steenhuisen will need to travel to and from work every day. This is going to be covered. His entire travel expense is not going to be a problem, whereas for many ordinary South Africans, travel is an important thing that they need to pay for every single day. And so as you can see here, journeys undertaken by motor vehicle are deducted from the annual travel allocation as follows. Journey under 150 Ks is quarter entitlement. Journeys from 150 to 300 Ks is half entitlement. Journeys from more than 300 Ks is one entitlement. And so very clearly here, we see that his travel expenses are going to be very much largely covered by Parliament. We then also see how he's covered for airport travel. And we also see that members of Parliament are offered the following: one laptop, one tablet, one mobile phone. Now, as far as I realize, most South Africans have to pay for their own mobile phone, of course, including those who are very poor. And a phone is never really cheap. A tablet, I don't know that many people that use it, but I guess many do. And then, of course, a laptop is necessary for many people due to work. Now, certain people receive laptops from their job, but others have to pay for their own. And this is incredibly expensive. Yet he, on his massive salary, which we're going to get into very soon, gets a laptop for free. And so we see already that his travel to and from work is covered, as well as his laptop and cell phone, as well as tablet if he has one. But there's more. Members may claim reimbursement for related communication expenses up to a maximum of 2,000 Rand per month, including Wi-Fi, landline, data top-up, and roaming. So that means even if you're in an international place, if you have your roaming on, you can get covered for up to 2,000 Rand. And this is pretty insane if you think about it, because just think about your phone bill on a monthly basis and how much that costs. I doubt that it adds up to 2,000 Rand, even though it could be pretty expensive, right? And yet, Steenhuisen gets his for absolutely free, because I am yet to see an ordinary kind of phone contract that is worth over 2,000 Rand per month. We then see that all equipment supplied by Parliament is provided with fixed data and voice allocations. All right, so at least they cap it off. And then where members maintain their own contracts, the full invoice with proof of payment must be submitted with the request for reimbursement. So they even get reimbursed if they decide to keep their own existing phone contracts from before they became members of Parliament. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see exactly how much members are paid. But before we do that, I want to highlight this paragraph, which is that members who relocate to Cape Town upon becoming members are entitled to an establishment allocation of 25,000 Rand to set up a second home. Look, I understand that housing costs a heck of a lot more than 25,000 Rand, but still 25,000 Rand is better than nothing. Now we're going to get into the salaries. If we take a look here, for their annual salary, each member of Parliament receives 1,274,536 Rand. So if we look at the gross monthly salary, which is obviously minus tax, it adds up to 106,211 Rand. And anybody living in South Africa knows that this is a massive salary to take home, much, much larger than the ordinary population. What's more he also gets certain other benefits that are covered outside of his salary. And that is something that we're going to get into below. So if we take a look here at medical aid, all members of parliament are part of the PARMED medical aid scheme. It's compulsory, and the member is responsible for the full contribution from their total remuneration package. So what is important to note here, if we look back at their salary breakdown, is that they do receive deductions of 7,784 Rand for medical aid. But again, that still leaves you with around 99,000 Rand of your gross salary. So it's still a pretty decent income at the end of the day. We also need to remember, as we've explained, that they have their travel covered. They do receive relocation costs, and even things such as a new mobile phone if they want one, a laptop, a tablet, as well as their monthly data and phone fees, all completely covered. And these are generally expenses that the ordinary South African needs to cover on their own with a lower salary. So moving on, we see how they also receive some pretty generous pension fund contributions. So as we can see here, a member contribution is 7.5% of their pensionable salary. That is a pretty standard practice, whereas the state's contribution is 22.5% of pensionable salary. Now, for those of you who might be familiar with this, generally a company who employs someone will look to match their contributions. So if, for example, an employee contributes 7.5% of their salary to pension, the company will also contribute around 7.5%. I've also seen examples where they've contributed between 10 to 15%, but even that's pretty high generally. I mean, 22.5% is massive. I've never seen that. And if any of you have seen circumstances where this has happened, hey, feel free to comment in the comment section below, because I sure have not. We then see how they also receive funeral benefits, as well as for a spouse and a child. Again, this is something that many South Africans pay for. They get it covered. We also see that they have personal accident coverage. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So ultimately, John Steenhuisen has very little excuse for getting into so much debt. We need to remember that he has been a member of parliament since 2011, and who knows how much more he gets paid now that he's Minister of Agriculture. Yes, he says that he sorted out his debt, but this is incredibly financially irresponsible. There are many South Africans, whether they are in debt or not, who have much lower salaries than him, who do not get their expenses covered. For example, petrol, travel expenses, flights. Let's also not forget that during his first 10 years of parliament, he would have had his flights covered, as well as those of his spouse, up to 20 per year, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, mobile phone gets paid for. His existing phone contract, if he decides not to take a new one, gets paid for. He gets help with his pension, so he'll have a much bigger pension than other people, much larger portion of pension contributions. He also manages to get his entire phone contract and Wi-Fi sorted out. He also is able to get a 25,000 Rand package to help him relocate to Cape Town, although let's be honest, he's probably been there for many years already, given his time in parliament. And so in my view, sorry, John, I just don't buy your story. I understand that maybe you came from humble beginnings, but to be earning so much more money than the average South African and have so many more perks, I really see no excuse. I personally know many people who are in much more difficult situations than you and claim that they do not have these kinds of financial issues. And so personally, as somebody who is watching you as a member of parliament who's supposed to be in charge of, well, helping to run the country, the fact that you can't even get your own personal circumstance in check is downright unacceptable. That's my take. But hey, if you disagree with me, feel free to comment in the comment section below. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and you found it insightful, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.